I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm Chris Susie.
And today we are joined by a very wonderful guest, Mattie.
Hi, it's nice to see you all.
Yes, and we will introduce her a little bit further in just a second, but I do have a few announcements before we get started. First off, I do want to show off this lovely little cross stitch that one of our para-junkies, Nicole Kingbird, made for us. It's really cute. JT and I met up with her to get coffee when she was in Savannah, and she was like, I made you this. And I'm like, this is the most precious thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And so now it lives here with us.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So we had to show it off. But yes, our para-junkies are very talented. And those of you who are not para-junkies, I'm sure you are also very talented. But as another side announcement, if you're listening to this now, that means that our merch is released. Yes, we have merch. We have these shirts that say, stay spooky, y'all. So if you want to wear that on your chest, or you want to wear the bootyful sweatpants with the ghost on your booty, that's pretty fun. We've got fanny packs, we've got hats, we've got all the things. So if you're looking to ghost up your wardrobe a little bit, then you know where to go. It's at hauntedcitypodcast.com, and that's where you can find our merch. And so now that we have those out of the way, Mattie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mattie Weikle, and I am an MFA student at SCAD in Savannah. And I've had a few ghostly encounters in my lifetime, specifically regarding family members. And I'm actually working at the Savannah Underground, and that's kind of how we met.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Maddie's one of our newest actors at the Underground. She plays Annabelle, which is our yellow fever patient, which is super fun. She also is now going to start giving tours. So if you like her, you should come take one of her tours. But let's dive right on into the fun part. So Mattie, when she was training for the tour, she showed JT this photo of her grandmother. So would you like to tell the story? Because I'm sure you're going to tell it better than I would, because I obviously was not there. But
yeah, absolutely. So my grandmother was really close with me, and it's actually my great-grandmother. I was very lucky enough to meet her, and she lived until I was about 8 years old. And I was super close with her, and she actually was born and died in the same house in the same room. And kind of when she passed away, I was sleeping, and I kind of had this dream that I was at her house. I'd walk downstairs, and she was like making bread, which she did every morning. And I had some bread with her and had a cup of tea, and she told me that she had passed on. And I got up that morning, and I went downstairs to see my mom, and we had a little family sit down, and my mom said, I have to tell you guys something. And I was like, I think I already know. I think great grandma has passed away. And she was like, yes. How did you know that? And I told them the dream kind of thing. Since then, I've had a few other dreams of family members passing away. But what's really interesting is in this photo, it is actually taken about a year after her death. And in the photo, it's in the house that she was born and the house that she died in. And we always have these huge family reunions together. And so we're all kind of sitting outside, taking a family picture. And on the porch, actually, which was being painted at the time, and later I found out hate blue. I wasn't aware of that before. Painting actually the floorboards and everything. There's a wet paint sign that's hanging up as well. And when we looked back at this photo in front of this porch, you can actually see my grandmother's face in the window. And, it's proof that someone wasn't out there, because there was no footprints on the wet paint still or anything like that. But clear as day, you can see her in the window.
So
it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's a very crazy story. It's so interesting. So Chris has never seen this photo, but I'm going to show you the photo.
Old eyes. I'm going to get right up on it because I like doing that. That's oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of amazing. Yeah, a lot of times when people will bring a ghost photograph in or something that they feel is supernatural, they find themselves doing the,
Yeah.
it's in the corner, the little spot. No, that is definitely a face.
Clear as day.
And you recognize this as
Yeah.
your grandmother.
If you want, I can pull up a picture of my grandmother as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, actually, when you think about, all the love that is gathered there. Familial ties and everything, and of course wanting to be included. I would absolutely see that as a wonderful. It's interesting because I'm so drawn to it. It's like because also being a printout from the computer, it is hazy in that I've printed this out from the computer feel. But the more you look at it, the more defined it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On first blush, you're like, is it a reflection? Is it a, or am I seeing something that could easily be explained away? But the more you begin to see, oh no, I can kind of make out how the shoulders are and and the neck and even the neckline of the shirt, or and that really does help give you definition to what you're looking at. As obviously a person, and I would not, after looking at this, I would not imagine that there wasn't a person, on the other side of the window. You get to that place where you're like, oh, if somebody showed this to me, I would not think it was paranormal. I would just think, oh, there's somebody standing at the window.
Yeah, somebody was late to the photo.
Right, late to the photo. Like, oh.
But
yeah, and actually going through with my family, how we take these group photos is we have someone set up the camera and then run to the opposite side to come in, and so everyone was on that side that right out front and everything. So.
And it's such a large gathering of people.
Yeah.
That's another thing about moments like this is. The more people who are there in love and together, that emotional contact and context should bring about that celebration of life. That idea that this is where my heart would be if I were still around. I would want to be with the people who love me and who I love, and then they love each other. And so when you see a large gathering of family, whether you see a spirit or not, they're there. Absolutely. Of course they're going to be there because the strongest bond you're going to make in your life, familial and love, those are the ones that are going to bring you back. Those are the ones that are going to make it apparent that you're still around. Yeah.
what I think is fascinating too is that she was born and died in the same room in the same house. That is so unique and very rare for people to have that type of experience. So of course she's going to also have like a form of connection to the home too. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you guys were having like a family reunion in her home, that was such a big part of her existence. I mean, it makes sense that she would still be kind of in an essence around the house in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an old house. I mean, it has a radiator and everything. So oftentimes like staying there even, you can hear almost like these creaks and stuff. And sometimes it sounds like though coming from her room and everything. And what we like to say about this photo is that Grandma had to come to a family reunion after she couldn't miss it.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
sure.
Yeah, but it's a really special place. That house has also been in our family for generations.
Oh,
even.
wow.
So
yeah. No, it's a super special photo, and like that is such a cool like experience for your family, I'm sure, and very validating too, for a lot of people who have had loved ones who come back and visit in the afterlife, to feel like, okay, well, if they can capture a photo of their loved one on camera, maybe my experience as well is just as valid, even if it's not on camera or something like that. So thank you for sharing that with us. We really,
absolutely,
we love seeing photos like this, and having experiences with loved ones is usually the first ghost experience for a lot of people. I know like my first ghost experience was with my grandmother. And I've told the podcast this a few times, but yeah, like when I was very little, because my grandmother passed away when I was 2, and I would wake up in the morning and I would be able to go downstairs and tell my parents like, oh, grandmommy came to visit me, even though I had no idea anything about her, didn't know what she wanted me to call her, but I could perfectly describe her. And she would do this for a very large point of my childhood. And so that was like how I realized that I could see spirits, was by, you know, having her come to visit me. But a lot of people, they will say, I've never had a ghost experience before until, you know, my mom passed away or my husband passed away and I feel their presence or things of that nature. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that I've interviewed thousands of people in my lifetime about ghosts. I've talked to them, and I say interview, but in many cases it is just discussion. But in a lot of cases it was, you know, taking notes and really performing an interview. And the most common ghost story, the absolute most common ghost story, is on the night my blank died, they visited me in a dream. On the night my grandmother died, on the night my uncle died, my sister, my brother, my husband, whatever it was, they visited me in a dream. It's the most common ghost story. And I know countless people who've had this experience, and some of them are very distinct and notable. And my own experience was with a friend who was in the hospital. I felt my bed like depressed by my feet, and it woke me up. So I believed that I was waking up, and he was sitting at the end of my bed. And he just looks at me and he says, my whole life has been a race between my liver and my lungs. And then disappears, which, you know, then I find myself sitting up and realizing, oh no, I was asleep. But I learned the next day that he had passed in the night. And it was one of those things where I knew it. You know, that experience was like telling me, oh, you know, he's gone. I had one of my exes, her grandmother, when her grandmother passed, she came and said, you know, you're going to have to come home, you know, come home. And so she woke up in the middle of the night and started packing before the phone even rang, you know, and sure enough, while she was packing, the phone rings. And it's like, oh, Marie's passed and it's time to come home. And she's like, I know. Gets in the car, drives home, drives to Marie's house, her grandmother, and it's now like dawn, but there's somebody mowing the lawn. And she pulls up, and it's, you know, a groundskeeper of the house, you know, a lawn maintenance guy. He's mowing the lawn, and the family's beginning to arrive. And he says, last night Marie came to me in a dream and told me I had to mow the lawn because there's going to be guests. And I was like, oh, wow.
Well, then it's interesting how many people like have those same experiences, or even like when people are about to pass, there's so many accounts of people saying that, like, my daughter who passed way before, you know, her grandmother, when my mom was dying, my daughter showed up and my mom kept saying like, oh, she's here, or whatever. And there are so many people who've worked in hospices, and to say that that's how they know that person's about to go, is when loved ones start showing up, and they say that they're seeing them in their room or things like that. So it's interesting how our loved ones kind of stick around with us as spirits. And it kind of shows that, like, you know, there is a little bit of free will as a spirit as well. You know, they aren't always confined to these spaces and things like that, because they're able to appear when you need them, or a lot of times it's in a form of grieving. You know, they know like this is going to help this person try to get through this grieving process by just seeing me one last time, or things like that. But on another topic, so I know you're kind of sensitive to spirits in a way. So do you have any other like paranormal experiences outside of just like family members, or do you have any other unique experiences?
Yes, I feel so attuned to it when I was younger, and kind of as I've gotten older, it creeps me out occasionally. So I tend to kind of block it off, hence like my silver necklace that I know you've seen before, but I like to wear that oftentimes. and like a different methods of meditation to kind of block some of it off from getting too much. But when I was younger, I used to hang out in my backyard in a hammock and stuff like that. And there was this man that would always come, like, and he was just working on the yard in the back and stuff. But I always think of him as like my friend. You know, when I was laying in the hammock, he'd often come and just like sit and talk with me. And I was sitting out there with my sister one day, and I was like, "Do you see this man? Do you see this man?" And she's like, "There's no man there. There's no man." And, you know, unconfirmed, but I'm pretty sure that's a spirit that I was seeing, not just my imagination, because it was so vivid. You know, if I saw his face again, I could definitely recognize it. And yeah, that's one of the main ones that I had when I was younger as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kids are so connected to the spirit world. So a lot of times, I think we've mentioned this before, where like, you know, when your kid has a imaginary friend of sorts, more than likely they're talking to somebody who's dead. Especially when they say how vivid it is and they know so many details about that person. It's hard to like disregard that and say like, oh, their imagination's just running wild. Because I mean, sure, there are kids that have very vivid imaginations, but a lot of times kids are just so open to the idea of the spirit world and things like that, that they're able to, you know, have those connections. And honestly, it's kind of nice for spirits too, to have someone who's living actually acknowledge them and validate them and have that connection. But it also opens kids up to a lot of really scary things as well. So I totally get why you'd be afraid of that, you know, even as an adult now, because that's also the reason why children are more susceptible to possessions and oppressions and stuff like that, because they are so open and they're so vibrant as energies. But
we've talked about it a lot as far as like towards the end of life, the idea of the passage of a spirit, the door opening up, and the ability of spirits to capitalize on the moment of death to cross into our plane and into our world, which is where you get sacrifice. You know, when you kill something, the door opens, and then you can try to manipulate something to come through. We very rarely ever speak of the fact that the door opens when you come into this world, and when you're coming into this world, when that door opens, spirits can attach or find their way in through the beginning of life as well as the end of life. So at the beginning of life, there is this vibrant and incredible life force that is coming into the world. I mean, people underestimate the pure miracle of life. They choose to think that it is chemical and biological and clinical, but it's significant. And when that life is young, it is the passage. It was the passageway in. So a lot of times they are trailing amazing paranormal, supernatural energies that spirits will be drawn to. And you do hear this. You hear this a lot of children. I had a friend whose child used to talk to an angel statue. And there's this
creepy.
little angel statue on their mantle, and she would whisper to it. But she was so young that she wasn't really a conversationalist, but she was to the statue. She was like always go up and whisper in its ear and talk to it. And it was so fascinating because, you know, it's creepy. Yeah, you're like, that's a creepy thing for a small child to do. But it's also kind of heartwarming because the child was so affectionate with it and so very, you know, enamored with whatever was happening, and whatever it was brought the child joy. It was happy to see an angel, you know, this, you know, actually it was more cherubim kind of,
Gotcha.
you know, childlike statue. And I find that endlessly fascinating is you hear the imaginary friends, and when imaginary friends are set up before the process of socialization, before like going to school, before knowing how to interact with other people on a regular basis, that opens the door for, well, how do they know to interact with an imaginary friend if they don't really have real friends to, you know, create that bond, that experience. So yeah, I think that is a lot of evidence of early life paranormal energy.
But I think it's also interesting that even in movies, they portray it a lot of times as like the ghost is having a tea party with the kid, or like, and I think that's pretty true to life as well, just because, you know, spirits, I think, can acknowledge that you are a child. And so they're going to want to do activities with you that are appropriate for, you know, a kid. So they'll sit and have a tea party with you, or they'll sit in the hammock with you and just hang out, or whatever it is. When it comes to talking to haunted objects, though, you know, when I was a kid, I was like, I can't get the logic of it, you know, because I had the haunted doll that lives in this theater. And then my sister had a haunted Teletubby, which was just horrifying.
That's pretty scary.
Oh, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. My mom hated it. You know, and my parents didn't have a ton of paranormal experiences with me, because I think they were trying to live in their disbelief of like, no, my child isn't the kid from The Sixth Sense, even though I would tell them, I'm like, the ghosts are going to get me at night. Oh, no. But my sister had the yellow Teletubby, whatever that one's name was.
It's a rhyming 2-word thing.
Yes, whatever that one was. And so these Teletubbies would talk when you like press its belly. But the problem is that it would talk even when no one was in the room. Yeah, like you'd hear it just babbling. It would go or whatever Teletubbies do, you know. And my mom got so freaked out by this thing because she like swore it would say like words sometimes, like things that it shouldn't have been programmed to say. And she tried to take the batteries out. She tried to take the voice box out. My sister loved the Teletubbies, so she didn't want to get rid of it, but she tried to like mutilate it in a way to like get it to not talk. And she said even without the like voice box in it, it would still say
Oh, yeah, I know. That's no good.
and I'm like, Teletubbies were freaky to begin with. So yeah, I'm just like, when I hear kids being like, I loved the angel doll and like it talked to me, I'm like, no, I can't get there. I can't get with the logic.
It's funny because my sister, when she was very young, had a Mrs. Beasley doll, which was from a show called, I think it was called The Family Affair or something, but it was an old woman doll.
Oh God.
And there was a lot of attachment back and forth, but and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but my sister had this ghost that followed her, an old woman that followed her from a cemetery. Like we were passing a cemetery, I think in North Carolina, and this ghost saw her, and for a good chunk of her early childhood, she would talk about this old woman, but she named her Mrs. Beasley, because of the doll. Because the doll was an old woman doll, which was weird to begin with. I don't know if you've ever seen a Mrs. Beasley doll. Mrs. Beasley was an old white-haired woman with glasses in like a long blue dress, which I'm like, oh, that's exciting. You know,
yeah,
the
right.
kids will love it. Here's Action Grandma, take it.
Action Grandma, she does kick flips.
Right. Well, you know, if you're imaginative enough, Action Grandma can do anything. But I think it was my sister's way of identifying the figure, because apparently the figure was an older woman with white hair and in a long dress. But she became, like, as time went on, as the old woman in black. But in the early instances, she had this Mrs. Beasley doll, and then there was this Mrs. Beasley spirit.
Yeah. Chris's sister, I know you have never met Jinhee, but she was definitely a person who, you know, was very surrounded by spirits.
Oh, yes, very much so. And not to go too far into detail, but my sister's always been very close to death. So she had always had an amazing, like, array of insight and ability. And when she was 21, she had a brain tumor. And when they removed the brain tumor, she lost a lot of the sensitivity that she had growing up. Like she always knew when things were about to happen, and she always had like this kind of sixth sense about things. And when they removed the tumor, it was like it all just kind of muted, and it was very interesting because she had had the tumor her entire life. It was a dermal cyst, a thing that kind of collected genetic material and just grew in her brain as she grew. Some people thought it was like a twin that had been swallowed. So, you know, her mind, and she also was this brilliant mathematician. She used to be able to do very complex math without working on it, like looking at problems and knowing the answer. She had a very interesting way. They tried to make her a tutor. They were like, you should teach. You're incredible. You're an incredible mathematician. But the way she knew math was, well, that number acts like this, and that number acts like this. And when they get together like that, this happens. And you can't teach that. You can't teach people, well, these are the relationships and numbers, and this is this. And so it was fascinating because she never showed her work. You know, she would just know the answer. And it was because in her mind, mathematics was a language that once you translate, you know the answer. But she couldn't write it out. She couldn't say this equals that equals that equals that. She only kind of like understood it. And I was like, that's amazing. When she had this brain surgery, she lost her math ability.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fascinating because the brain is an amazingly complex and amazing thing. But it was really interesting to see that transfer of ability.
Absolutely. Well, that is fascinating to hear because, it is something that a lot of people say that like you're born with the abilities that you have, but it's interesting that was the reason why it shut down, or like that's the pinpoint.
Even to the point, and it's interesting because I did not know this growing up, but near my grandfather's passing when he was dying, it turned out that he was a mathematician, and I didn't know this because by time I got to know my grandfather, he was a retiree, and he was this just pleasant, fun guy who went around the house and spoke French, super smart guy. But as he was passing, he talked in numbers. He would talk to people, but all he would say were a string of numbers, and people were like, "Oh, he's losing, he's going." And when Jinhee had this tumor removed, and she kind of lost her that interesting math ability. I was like, I wonder if that was some genetic bond. I wonder if there was something to it. Because if my grandfather at some point in his life was trying to communicate to another person, but only spoke in numbers, he was just spouting numbers to someone, trying to get them to understand something. I wonder if there wasn't something, because I did not get it. I am no math genius. I don't have the math bit. But I found that really interesting because could it be that there's something inherent in us that inherits these abilities, because that's an innate ability to understand something that again, when she tried to teach it, she'd be like, "What do you mean? That's an 8. You know how 8s are. you know what an 8 is like." And when it comes across that, it just was such an interesting way of processing information.
That's so interesting, and wow, I wish that I was born with that ability. I would trade in a lot of skills that I have if I could have been able to do that, because I was horrible at math.
Sounds like the study of Enneagrams.
Right? Yeah. Seriously. Those 7 wings, it's but so are you the only person who's like really sensitive to spirits in your family, or is like your sibling?
No, yeah, my sister actually is quite sensitive as well. She mostly is in touch with like tarot cards and stuff in a way.
Okay.
I read them occasionally, but not as well as my sister. And I've talked with my family about it before, and there's been kind of like strings of women in our family that are just kind of more sensitive to it, and have like found it like a spiritual kind of aspect to it mostly. Specifically, my grandmother was very like empathetic as well, and I think that also has a lot to do with it. Is being empathetic people, you're more open to allowing kind of this energy, and whether that energy is like spirits full-fledged, or if it's just a feeling, this intuition, allowing that energy to kind of pass through. Allows you to kind of decode it in a way with empathy, having that like a lot of those blocks away. And so even if, you're not born with the ability, I do think there are ways to develop it as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really special to have, that photo and have that connection with my grandmother. And also, from hearing from some of the things about her, that empathy as well that is passed through.
Absolutely.
It's really nice.
Yeah, that happens with a lot of families. I've noticed, especially with women, people who are born female or are female presenting in families and things like that. A lot of times it does get generationally passed through, which is so fascinating. I have a kind of similar trait with that with my grandmother on my dad's side. She was very, very spiritual and very psychically in tune. She was able to predict my mother coming into my dad's life because she would read playing cards. And so she would read my dad's cards against his will, and she would. And so she would be like, Carrie, I keep seeing this blonde lady in your cards. Who's the blonde lady in your life? And he's like, I don't know who this blonde lady is. And he was with somebody else at the time. And so he's like, you need to stop saying it though, because, and then a couple months after she said that, my mom literally fell into my dad's lap at a bar. So it's very interesting how those sort of abilities pass down, because I feel like when my grandmother died, I got her abilities of sorts. Yeah. So
I actually find it really interesting that it is women, and going off of what you said earlier about, life being so close, and perhaps there's a draw/connection between, people who are able to give birth and create this life and the psychic abilities and the ability to tap into it more.
Oh, absolutely. There is no question that, the feminine has such a connection with the cycle of life, far more than the male counterparts. It is definitely this easily traceable, and you find it too that if you look at history long enough, you'll see that the genuine fear of the feminine that led to witch trials, that led to persecution, that led to highly chauvinistic societies and paternal societies. The matriarch concept was a suppressed concept because of this power that is easily documented and recognizable and seen time and time again, that there's a connection to the cycle of life and the cycle of energy that goes into creating life that is not easily accessed by the male population. As a matter of fact, many of those ghostly stories that I know of children communicating and things of that nature seem to be far in the majority female presenting. And then upon the first, the beginning of puberty and the menstrual cycle, it ramps up, which creates even more of an interesting sensation of, you're coming into a power, a true power that if you were to focus it properly, and that's where, I am not an advocate of divination that much, tarot cards and divining in any way. It's it's knowledge that isn't necessarily meant for us, but it is an excellent way to hone that intuition, that power. You have, abilities that are scattered and wide. And by using something like cards, you are focusing in that empathy, that power. It gives it an outlet and a channel, because otherwise you could be bombarded. So if you find yourself bombarded by spiritual energies, by even emotions, sometimes finding that focal point, finding something like the tarot to really put that empathy to work, burn it up, as it were. Mm-hmm. You can actually use it as a wonderful tool, and this wonderful construct that gives you context for your own power and your own energy. So yeah, I do think that when we really look at the long sense of it, which, and I've said this many times, maybe not on the podcast, but certainly in private conversation, that we need more female-led paranormal teams. So female-led paranormal teams out there, or just all-female teams of paranormal investigators. I think that we need to focus more on that, because there is a distinct difference between the approach to the paranormal because I mean we use the term hunting,
Yeah.
ghost
Yeah.
hunting, and that's kind of a weirdly invasive and weirdly inaccurate portrayal of what you're attempting. We're not attempting to kill the ghost and stuff it and hang it on the wall. That is not what is happening. However, we've come to this place where a lot of the terminology and a lot of the ideas, the technology is very male when you think about it. It is we're tinkering with machines and we're trying to do all these things, and it's like, but where's the intuitive part of it? Where is the accepting part of it, the maternal part of it? It is my very honest opinion that we need two things more in the ghost hunting community, and that is women investigators who are at the lead and humor. Those two things are a part of creating an environment that ghosts want to be involved in.
It's very true.
Something lighter and softer than showing up, kicking open the door, and being like, "Where the ghost at?" That's just not conducive to the kind of work that you're hoping will get done in the field of paranormal investigation.
It's very true. But like on the idea of, like female energy being so like prominent in the spirit world and things like that, just look at folklore in general. I'm like, look at all of the deities that exist. Like you've got Hecate, you've got Artemis, you've got Bridget, you've got like all these amazing deities that are so strong, and like Hecate especially because she leans into the side of witches and women who have spiritual powers and stuff like that. It's always been there. It's always been around.
And let us not forget that one of the most enduring fallacies of the pagan side, or the dark, not that pagan's dark at all, but fallacy is the virgin sacrifice. When you think of a virgin sacrifice, you only think of women. You don't really think of the guy who's a virgin.
Unless it's hocus pocus.
Well, and in the end, though, it's because the word virgin itself was just young woman. That's what it meant. It did not mean, somewhere in there we converged the idea of purity and used the word virgin, and it took its mantle place there. But at one time, a virgin didn't necessarily mean someone who had never had sex. It was simply a blanket term for young woman, and so the young woman was the brunt of sacrifice, of holding up a mantle of purity, which was such an unfair thing to do, because it was like, well, women are pure, but men can be sullen, and so that's fine. A man can go out and do the dirty things. It's like, yeah, well, who's he doing it with? If
that is very true.
You're going to run out of virgins if you keep that up. So it's interesting because in that context, it's also a mistake of what you need to proceed with certain dark practices. The blood of a virgin, the blood of a young woman, the blood of a woman being a person who can bear a child, who can access a nexus of supernatural energy. That's a new connotation of what you're really trying to do. You're trying to get some of the blood that was associated with the beginning of life. So yeah, there's an interesting tie-in with society's recognition of the power of a woman. Closely followed by the suppression of a woman.
Oh, well,
because you do not want to acknowledge the power of a woman if you don't have that power. if you don't have that power, you're like, we got to do something. Well, build a tall building. Okay. I'll build a big tall building. So a woman do that. And it's like, no, it still pales in comparison to giving birth. So
very true. I'm like, that's graphic. If you've ever watched someone give birth, it is horrifying. But yes, so it is an interesting topic to get into. I think it's one we haven't really ever dove into entirely.
No, it's worth the examination at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I always like talking about witchy deities and things like that, especially Celtic deities. I love the Morrigan. She is so scary and so fascinating, but great representation of a woman to be feared because she will destroy anyone.
Absolutely.
So
well, and even when you look at Kali, the great death goddess, the concept of creation and destruction being in a feminine form is universal, because without the woman there is no life. And yes, many men will show up to the table being like, well, we contribute. It's like, calm down.
it's true.
There is a great deal to be said about that innate cultural fear and suppression of women, and the fact that women seem to have this connective and powerful source. Not to say that men don't, and not to say that men can't access it. Not to say that feminine energy is not accessible. It's just that in many societal constraints, we fear accessing the feminine. We fear admitting to having any feminine attributes, and that too, I think, is a part of this cultural, societal, the growth of civilization has always been we have to polarize these things and not allow them to cross, which I think is part of the struggle of our trans community, is they are going against millennia of strict regimen to ensure that the male energy is over here and the female energy is over there, and that is patently wrong. It's patently against everything that nature has taught us. But we are an unnatural brood. We are humans are terribly unnatural.
Well, I mean, and there are various cultures who have had belief in, like in a certain Native American cultures, there's the belief of the two-spirit, which I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but essentially it's somebody who embodies both the energy of the male spirit and the feminine spirit. And so essentially they are just like the highest spiritual awareness, essentially, is in a lot of different cultures. So,
and they recognize multiple genders. And not just 3, not just 4, but a variety.
Yeah. So on another side of, since we're in the realm of witchcraft, I know Mattie also is very into the witchy things.
Yes.
So when we're filming this, Halloween is tomorrow, or Samhain for you witchy pagan folks. So do you have any plans for what you're thinking of doing to celebrate, or...
I like to set up my altar and kind of do some tarot readings, burn some incense and everything, kind of allow myself to get grounded again, because it is a time where, this veil is so thin, especially. So being someone who's more susceptible to a lot of encounters, I tend to kind of do this meditation where if anyone's struggling with too many voices kind of going on, how I got really overwhelmed when I was in high school from kind of having nights where I wasn't really sleeping. I was scared to go to sleep because when I slept, I would just see so many different people trying to come into my dreams. And so there's a meditation that I do if anybody is in trouble with that and wants some. And it's essentially visualizing your house and visualizing closing all of the doors and locking them, closing all the windows and locking them and stuff like that. And so I kind of do that before I go to bed, especially on Halloween, because that's the time when the veil is so thin. But no, I'm planning on setting up my altar a little bit more, and often making like some autumnal tea is really nice as well, and kind of just reconnecting with my own body and my own mind, and kind of aligning in that way. And then also I'll be here at the Savannah Underground as well.
Yes. Yes, we will be with all of the heathenry of, the season. So I will also be here. But in a way to honor Halloween and Samhain, I personally like to honor ancestors and, past loved ones, which kind of aligns with that, like, Dios de los Muertos. Sorry, my mouth is not working. It is very early. Day of the Dead. Anyways, so basically it's kind of that same concept of, that's a good time because the veil is so thin that you're able to really commune with the ancestors. So some ways I know people have done it is that they leave place settings out for a past loved one at their dinner that night, or what I like to do is my ancestors liked whiskey and scotch a lot. The Scottish ancestors, they really they come through it. It is JT Scotch. I don't drink Scotch. I choose the one that he's less likely to notice usually, but that's okay. So
pour one out for the homies. Right?
Exactly. Well, it's funny actually. JT, I was not home one night, and he was drinking just like a really nice Scotch to decompress or whatever. And he poured some into my ancestors' offering bowl, and he goes, "I figured they would like it. It's an Oban, like what, 12." Oh, an Oban 18. And he's like, I figured they would like it. So I just poured a little bit for him. And I was like, you're on the right track, buddy. He's like, I am trying to gain favor from these people. But yeah, there are things that you can do in that way, along with, like reconnecting yourself, like recharging before we go into, the solstice time of the year where there's darkness, and really getting yourself figured out before we go into the time of just not a lot of light outside. And
yeah, and that's the whole point of our Halloween is it marks the beginning of a season of death. You're going into winter. You're going into the time when nature recognizes it, and that's one of those things. Is we've become obsessed with the scary aspect of it. But the truth of the matter is, because the veil is so thin, it is the time to really honor those who are supporting you and who are around you, and you can more easily communicate. Just in thought. One of those things that people fail to recognize is that we are constantly haunted, constantly. If ever in your mind something pops up, some person from your past, a lost loved one, just pops up randomly without there being association, you can kind of just call that a haunting. That is a recognition of a spirit's energy in your life. Whether or not it is that woogity kind of sensation of a spirit showing up, it doesn't matter. You are actively participating with a spirit that is not present in the sense that we deem presence. So Halloween is an excellent time to really look for signs, feel out the sensation, because this is as close as they get, because it hardens over the winter, and in many cases in the dead of winter is when it's more harrowing, because people want to think that Halloween is the spooky season. It's no, when you're in the season of death, when you're in the absolute frozen wastes, and mind you, we're in Savannah, so we don't get that, but the concept being, why they used to bring trees into their house was to remind them that this isn't the end.
Exactly.
that there is green in the world, that there is, a spring coming, the promise of spring, which is that rebirth, that new life. And so, yeah, the disparity and the despair of the deep, dark winter is where you're more likely to be accosted by spirits versus, this evening that is about being able to communicate, being able to reach out, being able to put together some kind of presentation of self for your spirit guides and your spirit attachments. So don't think of Halloween as, we call it spooky season. We indulge in all these frightening aspects of it. But the truth of the matter is, and we say it a lot on the show, love is the strongest bond between the living and the dead. And love is the path for most of these spirits to express themselves, to interact. And it doesn't necessarily have to be familial. It doesn't even have to be someone you know. We can share love for our fellow man. We can share love for, the condition of humanity. And if we could practice a little more of that, and this is the time to do it. This is the time when, we kind of laid over, All Saints Day, All Hallows Day. We laid it over, the rich pagan traditions, and we kind of like, because there was a recognition when the Christians were really trying to make those conversions and ensure that everybody was there was this absolute recognition that, oh, you know what, this day, that November 1st is the day, but the night before.
Yeah.
And so it makes for this interesting thing that culturally we've accepted that this is the time for spirits to appear and show up and participate with our lives.
Yeah. And that is not to say that we don't like the traditional spooky things.
Oh, no,
I love Halloween.
Absolutely.
But
don't get us wrong. It's our concept of Halloween and the practice of Samhain is much
very
different.
Very different.
So indulge in Halloween, and knowing that this is actually airing after Halloween, indulge in every Halloweeny thing. Love the things that you love. Spooky people be spooky, but at the same time, note that we do have a tendency to alter or lean towards a more sensationalistic version of hauntings and of and we again, another thing we say on this podcast a lot is we tell the scary stories because they have more punch to them. But they are not the most common ghost story. The most common ghost stories are ones about family reaching out, of seeing family members or people that you love. Love and light are far more present in the world than the dark, boogity boogies.
The boogity boogities. But it is, it's also funny though to see some of the traditions that we've adapted to be less frightening for Halloween. Because think about like jack-o'-lanterns. Do you know what they used to carve before it was jack-o'-lanterns? I'm not sure if most people know this. It was turnips. And do you know how scary turnips are when you carve them? They're so weird and creepy looking.
They are peculiar. And it's peculiar to see a turnip with a candle in it.
Yes.
And it's funny because we even came up with we retrofitted a fairy tale, folk tale about Stingy Jack to help people transfer into it, but putting a light inside a hollowed out vegetable is a long tradition.
Yes.
It actually predates all the things that we know of. Is this was a way to light your way. There are lanterns for the evening. You couldn't carry it in your hand, so the handy things that they had, root vegetables, gourds, things like that, it was not uncommon to put them in there. And putting a face on it, that was just somebody's really twisted idea. It's like, I'm going to show you something. Look at this.
Like, it looks
and
like
it might have been entertaining
face
at the time, but
it is creepy though when you look back at like old photos of carved turnips. And there are still some countries that do it, which is even more creepy because they're like, yes, kiddies, walk around in your costumes and hand out turnips. It's like
delicious.
And I would be really angry too if I got a turnip.
Yes.
I'm just saying, not that I trick or treat anymore, but if I show up at your door with a candy bag, don't throw a turnip in there.
I mean, honestly, I would take a carved turnip over like a pack of dental floss or something. Like, so
that's
those
true.
houses.
And don't be judgy with your Halloween give outs. Don't be like, well, here, floss.
Yeah.
I'd be so mad at floss.
Well, have you, or like, that's a fun thing to talk about just in general, a very side tangent. Just like the weird things that people hand out at Halloween. Like, because it really says a lot about a person.
Oh, sure.
Really does,
Absolutely.
yeah. You can always tell who the dentist is.
Yes.
You can always tell.
Or the person that is just a little off and handing out homemade treats and they're like,
yeah, we can't do that. We're past the
it's not the 70s anymore. So
well, and it's not even as cost effective anymore.
Oh, it's not.
You can buy a gigantic bag of candy for a lot less than the ingredients of your, hundreds
popcorn
of
balls.
Exactly, popcorn ball. Just the time alone to make a popcorn ball is extensive.
It is. Well,
pennies is also a thing. If you don't give a bag of pennies.
Yes, one for you and one for you. Don't go spending it
everywhere.
Exactly. Well, with that, now that we are getting delirious on this, but thank you, Mattie, for joining us.
Yeah,
we
thanks
really
for having
appreciate
me.
having you.
Yeah, it's been a ton of fun, and thank you all.
Yes. So definitely, if you guys have any like photos or things that you want to send us, you're more than welcome to, because we always like seeing your various ghost photos and ghost experiences. Also, as always, if you don't already follow us on TikTok, make sure to follow us at the Savannah Underground, and then on our new Instagram at the Most Haunted City on Earth. And then if you are not already a parajunkie, definitely consider becoming one, because you get special, discounts and stuff on merch, and you get exclusive content, and you get to see my dogs often, and that's fun. So,
It's important.
Yes, it's really important to see Tartan in his pumpkin sweaters. That's the content that they're coming for. But yes. So with that, though, thank you guys again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.